Yeah, I think there are two things that are quite important. Number one is that we could look at the Bhagavad Gita as three sections. This is something that our experienced teachers will quite often do, where the first section is made out of the first 6 chapters, and then the middle 6 and the last 6, where the first 6 chapters is really about us interacting and behaving in the world, which now chapter 6 is the last chapter of that section. So the following 6 chapters, it will become a little bit more theistic, more bhakti-like, where we're talking about really our relationship with Krishna. And then the last 6 chapters will be more about knowledge, like Dhyāna-yoga, knowledge, realized knowledge. So with that in mind, we know that this chapter is still addressing our behavior, the things that we do in the world. And this will be the last chapter of that section. Now, the other context I think is quite interesting is that this is called Dhyāna-yoga. So Dhyāna-yoga really means the yoga that will allow us to control our minds. There have been many works that are focused on this alone, on this path alone. Perhaps the most prominent example is Patanjali with his Yoga Sutras. That is what he's talking about, Dhyāna-yoga, in his Yoga Sutras. The controlling the mind. You control the mind in order to attain self-realization. However, this, especially in the context of the entire Bhagavad Gita, presents a big contrast to what Krishna has been describing so far and prescribing, not only describing, but also prescribing to Arjuna and hence to us all, which is that our spiritual practice is not devoid from activities in the world, perhaps even ordinary activities, such as having a job, starting a business, having a family, becoming a householder, etc. So Krishna doesn't shy away from encouraging us to participate in this world in this manner. He does, however, if we've been studying the Gita up to this point, it is very apparent that Krishna does encourage us to do that. We can say that that is, let's say, our duty, our duties while in the world. And then Krishna does highlight that we should do our duties without being attached to the results. That really the renunciation that is linked to yogic traditions, more generally speaking, really is something that takes place internally, that we must be renounced in our hearts and minds. And that renunciation takes place or is revealed or exemplified by us doing our duty, not being attached to the results, because internally we know that we're doing everything for Krishna. And that renunciation, more often assigned to yogics in a cave and so on, is really something internal. Even if I am engaged in the world as a father, as a business person and so on, but if my inner consciousness is such that I'm doing everything for Krishna's pleasure, then that is actually true renunciation, not necessarily sitting in isolation from the world. So the context of specifically this chapter is that this is one of the very few chapters where Krishna is going to elaborate on what this more secluded path would look like. Secluded meaning you would actually have to take yourself away from the more ordinary like activities of the world, not have a family, not have a job, but rather be in, even in a temple or monastery, let's say, full time, and you just work in the, you live in the temple, you work in the temple, everything you do is directly related to this spiritual like lifestyle, right? There's nothing that you do that is not part of that. Or in a more traditional way, more ancient way, as Krishna will describe in this chapter, really you're going to a cave in the Himalayas, right? Or you're going to a forest, which at that point then obviously you are separated and secluded from the world. So chapter 6 is one of the very few chapters where Krishna is actually going to elaborate in quite a few details what that practice would look like. However, there's a debate in this approach in regards to this chapter, where we could ask ourselves, is Krishna recommending this? The quite clear answer is no, from a general perspective. Krishna is not recommending it, but yet he's describing it. And the question would inevitably come up, if we are thinking about this in depth, is, well, then why is Krishna talking about it? If he's not recommending it, why is he describing it as a bona fide means by which you could attain perfection? And as we were discussing with Tukaram, and as we went really deep into this question, the obvious answer would be that because even though very, very few, still there are people whose personality or even inner consciousness is such where they have truly had enough from the world, and they are not really in the type of psychic mentality, social needs of interacting with people, having jobs, having a family, but rather they are truly just concerned about making spiritual progress. So although very few people of this mentality, of this psychology exists in the world today, or even back then when Krishna was speaking with Arjuna, still there are some that are like that. And for them, there is this path. And Krishna would not say, well, then too bad, you're going to go to hell forever because you didn't choose the being engaged in the world and doing your duty and not being to the results way, not being attached to the results way, but rather you want to be more secluded. So yeah, you're going to go to hell forever. No, Krishna is not that type of unreasonable God. So there are people like that. Hence, there is a path which is suitable for such people. But it's with a very basic thought experiments. The vast majority of people living in the world today could easily conclude that that's not a path for them, because you would require what Krishna is about to describe in this chapter, and that is, even according to Arjuna, impractical. As what Arjuna is going to describe this path as coming up soon here. So then the first question, the first debate could be, well, then why is Krishna talking about this? Well, because although very few, there are people that are like that. And is Krishna then describing something that we should do 1 or 2 hours per day? Should we be engaged in our duties in the world? And that would consume the vast majority of our time. But then let's say I come back home or go to the temple, for 1.5 to 2 hours, I then engage in a practice like this. The answer is no. There is no evidence. There is no clear evidence that that's what Krishna means here. And for 2 reasons. Number 1 is Arjuna's reaction. Again, when Krishna describes this process in detail, Arjuna expresses in a very negative way his reaction to it. He says, hey, Krishna, this is impractical. I don't think it can be done. Now, again, Arjuna is a very highly qualified person here. And if Krishna was describing this path as something that you do 1 or 2 hours a day, what's the problem? Like, we're even doing it. So why would Arjuna have such a strong reaction to that? So that really implies that Arjuna took it as this is something that we do full time, not just I am engaged in my duties in the world, come back home and do this for a while. Not like that, because of Arjuna's reaction. And then, and the other point that causes us to think that Krishna really means this as a full-time practice is texts 11 and 12, where Krishna says to practice this yoga, one should go to a secluded place. And a secluded place where, secluded from people. So Krishna is saying you should go there. And you're really controlling your mind, which is the main point of this type of yoga, to control your mind from all angles, right? But Krishna's description of this practice really points to something that you are doing full time. You're going to a secluded place, you're not engaging with people in a more ordinary way, you are completely free from sex desire, you meditate on Krishna the whole time. So this is really indicating that this is a full-time practice rather than a part-time practice. What do you think about that, Kim? I know you were discussing about this earlier today.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice summary, and especially the points you made about why we would interpret this text as not being modern day meditation. Just Arjuna's severe reaction to it, I think, lends to the fact that, no, this is a serious full-time practice. And yeah, I'm sure I would react in the same way that Arjuna did upon hearing, what this lifestyle would entail. And also, like, it's a little discouraging at first to think that, oh, is this the only way you can control the mind? And obviously that's not the case, but to think that, oh, I need to go down this 24/7 path of meditation in order to be able to control the mind is a little disheartening at first, but yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, the path of controlling the mind is not something that is not present in bhakti-yoga that we follow. It's just that it is taking place in two different ways, it seems, because in this way, where let's paint the real picture here, especially the way Krishna was talking to Arjuna. The idea is that really you are sitting in a cave, right? Or in a forest somewhere, really secluded. Then what's around you, right? Like nature. Maybe you have to watch out for scorpions and snakes and things of that sort, but it's not going to be the stock market or diapers for your new children or, buying a new home. So those are not the things that are going to be distracting your mind, but still you have to control your mind in one way or another. So obviously, if you are more engaged in the world, the challenges that will come in regards to controlling your mind will be different than if you're sitting in a cave. And what does it mean to control your mind under that scenario, right? So Dhyāna-yoga is really meant to, the essence of it is to control the mind. And there are many texts here that will exemplify that. We'll touch on those quite soon. But the point that I wanted to make at this point in the chapter is that bhakti-yoga also controls our mind in the sense that we are thinking of Krishna always. And it is not possible to not think about anything. We are always going to be thinking about something. It is not possible to completely eliminate the activities of the mind. But however, if you are able to control the mind to the point that all you are thinking about is Krishna, you have attained the highest control of your mind, because your mind is not deviating from anything except Krishna. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of times what you just said, people think that controlling the mind means emptying the mind. Many years ago, I tried a Vipassana retreat where you're just literally meditating for 10 hours a day and living in a very simplified lifestyle. And during the meditation, you were encouraged to just focus on like the bridge of your nose or one small part of your body to kind of control the thought patterns of your mind. And in the end, while it's nice to control the mind, it didn't seem like there was any purpose to it. Like, what's the point of this? And so the idea that, oh, to control the mind means to focus your mind on something higher, something like Krishna, and thinking about Krishna all the time being the ultimate goal is controlling the mind. I think it's a pretty big shift in mindset for especially the way our society views meditation about, yeah, you just need to empty the mind, no thoughts at all, which is not realistic at all.
Right. So text 6 and 7. Text 6 reads, "For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. For one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy." So with this text in mind, I like to go back. I know we spoke about this in depth in our previous episodes, but I like to go back and from the Vedic point of view, describe once again, what is the activities of the mind? What is the purpose of the mind? What does the mind do? How does it affect us? So from a Vedic perspective, in our Vedic scriptures, the functions of the mind is to like and dislike, right? The intelligence will plan, come up with strategies and tactics in order to attain that which the mind likes and push away that which the mind doesn't like. But the function of the mind itself is just to like and dislike things. Oh, I like these things and I dislike this sort of things. So when we conquer that mind, what does it mean? What would be then the benefit of conquering the mind, especially in regards to this text, right? That we just read, text number 6, which I think is quite related to the point you just made, Kim, that if the mind is my best friend or my worst enemy, then it's really worthwhile taking a look at it and control it. Because if I'm just meditating on a tip of my nose, all right, how a mind who is fully focused on the tip of my nose, how is that mind my best friend? It's pointless, doesn't seem to give me that many benefits, except the benefit of not becoming my greatest enemy, but it's not necessarily my best friend. Let's say if my mind is fully fixed in the tip of my nose and empty from any other thoughts, then perhaps it is not my greatest enemy because it's not focused on hate and anger and lust and greed. Okay, but that's just half. Well, how about the other half where the mind becomes our best friend? That, like you said, Kim, that point is not part of that, you know? So I like to read it in this way, because if the mind is conquered, then by my intelligence, I have already recognized that the way in which my mind becomes my worst enemy is if my mind is envious by nature. My mind is envying things. My mind is hating, is constantly angry or very lusty, right? Then my mind will want these lusty things or will be easily agitated and angry. So my mind is really driving me to do these things, and my intelligence is cooperating with it. Oh yeah, you really enjoy lusty things? All right, then let's come up with a plan and let's indulge in lust. Or you're really fearful and you're very angry by nature, then yeah, wait until somebody else disrespect me and we'll see. They're gonna get it, I'll give it to them. And so that is your worst enemy. But then now, if the mind is really thinking like, wow, Krishna is in control. He is that from which everything comes, and he's controlling everything. But also he is a loving controller, not controller for the sake of controlling things, but controlling things in a way in which we all benefit. And he really truly cares about us, and he knows what we want, what we need, because he's also all knowledgeable. If I know that by intelligence, then my mind will allow me to see things in a different way. I can see that I'm not in control. That is going to give me some humility because I don't control things. Krishna does. I'm just an instrument in his hand. That humility now becomes part of my mentality, becomes part of my mind, which will see not only me, but also others as people in the same predicaments, increasing my compassion and love for people and even animals, as opposed to envy and hate. So now my mind is becoming my best friend. And I am controlling my mind that way because Krishna is the center. And when Krishna is the center, we acquire all of his qualities. And because we have those qualities as well. That's the beautiful thing about Krishna and us being the same in essence, which is spirit, is that we possess the same qualities. But a mind that is constantly bombarded by hate, lust, and anger is going in the wrong direction as our worst enemy. But a mind who is conquered and has again attained the qualities that are Krishna-like is my best friend, because now my mind is compelling me to act in the right way, the way in which is going to uplift me as opposed to degrade me. And then text 7, it reads, for one who has conquered the mind, the Supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. So the idea of the Supersoul is something that we already spoke about in previous episodes, but I'll briefly describe it once again. Krishna is always with us. This is a hypothesis, right? Like God never abandons us. God is always with us. The way the Vedic literatures talk about that is like literally there is a part of Krishna who is within our heart. We the soul, we are situated, physically speaking, in the geography of the body, in the heart. But it is not the only spirit that is there. There is another spirit entity there, which is what we call the Supersoul. So actually Krishna is there as well. So we are there, and so is Krishna as the Supersoul. So, but we are distracted. We can't see it. We can't see him there. There's a very beautiful analogy about this, which is that imagine a tree full of fruits, edible fruits. And then imagine that there are two birds on this tree. One bird is us. The other bird is Krishna, the Supersoul. Now, we, as that one of the two birds, we are preoccupied in eating the fruits of the tree, not really paying attention to this other bird who is right there next to us, because we are so preoccupied with the tree. Like, wow, look at all these fruits here. Look at all these different branches of this tree. Look at all these leaves and look at all this magnificent tree. And it's a big tree. And we are going from branch to branch, always so busy and always wanting to enjoy these different fruits. And the other bird is just quietly sitting there, observing us, going through this trip. But nevertheless, that other bird is there, waiting for us to, at one point, get tired, or waiting for us to turn and look to him, as opposed to all these different branches and all these different fruits of the tree. So that's a very beautiful analogy that comes up a lot in Vedic literature of these two birds. So that's what that means. The Supersoul is there and so are we, but the fruits of the tree are the different desires that we have in the world. The world is the tree, and the different things that we try to attain for our sense gratification are the different fruits and the different branches. But Krishna, nevertheless, is right there next to us. All it is required is for us to shift our mind that I am going to gratify myself by enjoying these fruits. But if I calm myself and take my mind away from that, if I have attained tranquility, I can just turn around and see that Krishna has been next to me the whole time. And I have just been distracted by the mind, compelled to strive for these different fruits of this tree, which can be any material desire we might have in the world, in the entire universe. So this text speaks very highly about this, because controlling the mind is not easy. Whether it is the Dhyāna-yoga way or the bhakti way, it is still a work. For us to always think about Krishna and nothing else is a very high goal. In fact, Swami, as the title that our gurus will have, Devamita Swami, Radhanath Swami, their names always ends, their title always ends with Swami, right? That means, Swami means that who has controlled the mind. That's what Swami means. So it's a very high position. But then what is the prize? What is there to gain? Why should I engage myself in this difficult task to control the mind? Well, this text number 7 to me is so interesting, because it says, for one who has controlled the mind, the Supersoul is already reached. So there's nothing in between us and Krishna as the Supersoul. So let's say us and God. The main thing that stands between us and God is our mind. And the prize for controlling the mind is Krishna. That is the highest prize. There's nothing more lasting. There's nothing that will give you more for your return. Nothing is going to give you a better return on that investment. Because it's saying there's nothing else that needs to be done. If you control the mind, the Supersoul is already reached. So that speaks very high to me, that why should I engage myself in controlling the mind? God then is already reached. At the end of that, Krishna is there. What do you think about that, Kim?
Yeah, I really love text 7. I'm glad you called that out. And I also like the last sentence, to such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. And we've had other episodes where we've talked about the equanimity of being in Krishna consciousness and viewing everyone the same, whether it's a serial killer or a Vaishnava, like a Swami, as you just mentioned. And so, yeah, controlling the mind, it's such a peaceful place to be, where yes, you could go to a cave and try to eliminate all of the distressors in your life. Like, oh, I'm going to get away from all this drama and this, stressful job, and just go to a cave and meditate. But the reality is, as you said earlier, that is not really the path that the majority of people are going to take. And so to be able to stay in this world, focus on something higher, and then still be amidst the stresses and the drama, and have equanimity and see everything as the same, and I think it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, and the part you mentioned of text 7, to such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same, is like, okay, so I have Krishna right next to me. I've controlled my mind, and therefore the Supersoul is already reached. So if the Supersoul is reached, meaning if I'm with Krishna, if I have attained Krishna, what does it matter if it's 100 degrees outside or minus 10? Like, it doesn't matter. I have Krishna right with me. Like, why, like if I get hired by Google or fired from McDonald's, like if I get promoted to be vice president of Google or fired from McDonald's, what's the point? I have Krishna. None of that will matter. So all of these things will become the same. So it's like a symptom of what it means to control the mind. You control the mind, boom, you have Krishna. You have Krishna, all the things from the world, they're going to be irrelevant. They're more of the same.
Yeah, I really like that point. When you have something like gold, it just doesn't matter. Everything else seems trivial.
Exactly. If I have $1 million, who cares what happened to my $100 bill or my 1 penny? It doesn't matter. Like, somebody stole my penny, so be it. Somebody stole my $100, so be it. I have $1 trillion in my bank account. None of these things will matter anymore,
Yeah.
Yeah, so text 10 to the 17 is quite interesting, because it describes Krishna is really talking about what is this Dhyāna-yoga like. Kim, would you like to read those texts so we can go through them all together to really get a sense of what this practice that Krishna is talking about here would look like?
Yes. Okay. So text 10, a transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. 11 and 12. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. And text 13 and 14. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. And text 15. Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna, by cessation of material existence. And text 16, there is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. And finally, text 17, he who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, you also had some further thoughts on 15 and 16. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I really liked how Krishna was calling out the importance of our lifestyle and how it is supporting our intention of controlling the mind. And I know in this tradition, for those who are serious in it, you adopt the 4 regulative principles of no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no drugs or intoxicants. And so sometimes people might think, wow, that's a little overly restrictive. Are you just trying to, punish yourself or be really restrictive? Or they don't see the point of it, the bigger point of it. And to me, it's really clear after having adopted the principles and lived it for a while to see that, oh, when you do give yourself all the advantages that you can of, yeah, maybe we're not moving to a cave, but we're somewhat controlling the aspects of our lives that may bring us down, such as intoxicants or casual sex or what it may be. And how that really, the point of it is to support your pursuits of spirituality, of self-realization, of developing an intimate relationship with Krishna. And lifestyle is very important. It's the first place you should start to really help yourself.
Yeah, even to the point of eating too much or eating too little, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. Krishna is really bringing the point home that our lifestyle does help or prevent us from attaining spiritual realization, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Right. So the next section that I like is text 20 to 23. I'll read that text. It reads, in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So there's a lot being said here, but the aspect that I really like about these two texts, actually 3:20 to 23, is this. I'll read it again. In that joyous state, so the states that this yoga practice would give you as a result, right? That you would find yourself in a joyous state. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless, transcendental happiness. And so that part, and then the other part is that upon gaining this, he thinks there's no greater gain. So I like to make this a bit scientific in terms of neurology, the way our brain works, right? So we know that there are a few hormones, endorphins and dopamine, that will elevate our mood, let's say. In fact, a lot of these hormones, these are the very same hormones that are released in our system, either by good or bad things. So if you go working out, you get a lot of endorphins, right? But also people that take drugs or any intoxicants or sex itself, they release the same type of hormones. And we can literally get addicted to them. Tukaram Prabhu was actually discussing this in our class yesterday, on Saturday. And we can actually get addicted to these hormones, either through a chemical beginning. Let's say our brain is releasing these hormones because of drugs or sex, etc., or even food, or through some other, let's say, more spiritual or higher means. It's still, we're going to enjoy it. Like, what we are looking for is enjoyment, some kind of pleasure. Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer. So his nature is to enjoy. And because we are part of Krishna, our nature is also to enjoy. So to not have enjoyment is not an option for the soul. We must always enjoy because we are part of Krishna, and Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer. So it's natural to want to enjoy. But then now we can enjoy from things that will degrade us or things that will elevate us. And unfortunately, the position of the vast majority of the people in the world, myself included, is such that we are still so blinded. Our understanding of what is actual enjoyment is so small, to the point that we depend on things that actually degrade us in order to enjoy, such as things like intoxication and casual sex and so on. As far as the brain is concerned, we are releasing the same type of hormones that will give us the good feeling that we are hankering after, that we are addicted to. But these same hormones can be released by higher practice. And what this text is pointing to here is that in these joyous states, in the states of a pure controlled mind, in the states of a direct loving relationship with Krishna, in that joyous states, one is situated in boundless, transcendental happiness. Boundless? I don't care which drug we may be taking here, it is not boundless. Whether it's alcohol, which is only met with a terrible hangover the next day, or heroin, or cocaine, or whatever, not by practical experience, but by observing others or hearing from others. These drugs will, like the side effects, the withdrawal symptoms, those things are terrible. It is in fact, alcohol is perhaps one of the worst ones, right? I think alcohol is the only drug that if you actually stop, like if you've been an actual alcoholic for a long period of time, like a chronic alcoholic, and you actually stop and you don't take it anymore, you literally die. Where other drugs, you're gonna go through severe withdrawal symptoms, but you don't die, which is to say that these things have a very harsh effect, even though it gives us that momentary high, which will last for like what, no more than 24 hours, I would say. I don't know exactly what the experiences with some hard drugs would be, but I would imagine that no matter which drug we're talking about, within 24 hours or maybe 48 hours max, I would argue, those effects are gone, and then you're only left with misery. But here we are talking about boundless, something that will not have an end, is boundless, and it is transcendental. It is not from this world, which means anything from this world is bound to beginning and an end, because we live under time, and everything will have a beginning, and we're going to like that, but everything is going to end because it's the nature, the effect of time in material world. But if we're discussing a possibility of boundless, transcendental happiness, what's a more worthy goal pursuing? If it is our nature anyways to have to enjoy, then the best type of enjoyment would by default be that enjoyment which is boundless. And then what Krishna is saying here, and to us, this should really test our faith. Do we really believe in what Krishna is saying here? Krishna is saying that being situated, never shaken, and the mind is like, where is it again? Situated, established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there's no greater gain. Like, we have not gained that, right? So we are not in the position where we can think and feel and have a realization that there's nothing greater. That by experiencing that, we would have the conviction that this is the greatest feeling, that this is the greatest happiness. But that's what Krishna is saying, that once we attain that, we will think that there's no greater gain. It's obviously a subjective experience, an experience that is to be had in the first person. But that's our faith. Like, that really tests our faith. It should test our faith, right? Because our mind is here telling us, do this thing and you're going to really like it. Do this other thing and you're going to really like it. And then maybe you do, and you do like it, and then it reinforces your liking of that thing, right? But this, according to Krishna, it is an experience that would cause you to think that there's nothing greater than that. And it is boundless, transcendental happiness. How does that speak to you, Kim?
Yeah, I thought you broke that down really nicely. And I also noticed that in the end, you know, I like the last sentence once again of this indeed is actual freedom from all miseries, where a lot of times people, as we said earlier in the episode, people are striving so hard to get away from this misery or that misery, when really, if you're focused on something greater and have that connection, then the miseries around you are going to be lessened. That's the actual freedom. The freedom is not, I need to get away from this person or get away from this situation. The freedom is that, no, you can be in any situation and have a different focus and a different priority in life. And that's true freedom.
Right. I really like text 30 as well. Text 30 reads, for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. This is such a romantic verse. I think, like any movie, right? Romeo and Juliet, or any type of romance that is really profound, that moves us, that causes us to experience the best of human sentimentality, right? It would be something like this, right? Where the two characters are always thinking about each other, where like, that person is never lost to me and I am never lost to that person, right? So now we're getting a glimpse here of how Krishna sees this from his perspective, right? He's saying, for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost. So that's our position, right? Krishna would never be lost to us because we see Krishna everywhere, whether it be a high human or low animal. We see that there's that spark of life, there's spark of consciousness that is there, and we honor and we respect that. So we see Krishna everywhere and sees everything in him, well, because he is that from which everything comes. So space itself is in Krishna. Space itself needs to exist somewhere. So where does space exist if Krishna is all there is? Space itself exists within Krishna. So therefore, everything is actually within Krishna. And if we can wrap our minds around this somewhat metaphysical truth, it's kind of bewildering, but it's also true. Everything is in Krishna. So then, obviously, if we have that kind of vision, Krishna is never going to be lost to us because we're going to see Krishna everywhere. But then what does Krishna say is at the end, nor is he ever lost to me. So then that's Krishna's part, where he is also having us in his mind the whole time. We are never lost to him as well. What do you think about that romantic statement of Krishna, Kim?
I agree. It is very romantic and poetic, and it's my favorite text of the chapter too. And I remember when I first came to Krishna consciousness, one of the verses that spoke to me was of a similar vein in chapter 9, I think text 34, where it's basically always engage your mind in thinking of me, become my devotee, worship me, and just that idea of always being engaged in me. Surely you will come to me. And it's just so comforting that despite all of my fall downs and failures and keep getting back up and trying again, that Krishna is always there, and that in the end, I do have faith that I will keep progressing and Krishna will keep revealing himself to me, and it will get better and I will get better, and that we're never lost. We're always, as Tukram always says, we're always the X factor. Krishna's never gone anywhere and is never going anywhere. So that's always very comforting to me.
Yeah. Then we get to Arjuna's reaction to this type of yoga. Arjuna said, "Oh Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and undurable to me. For the mind is restless and unsteady. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, or Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind." So that's Krishna, that's Arjuna's strong reaction to this type of yoga, right? So that's one thing that led us to believe that Krishna was describing this path of yoga, this particular path of Dhyāna-yoga, as something that you do full time, because Arjuna reacts that way. Right? If it was for us to sit there and for 1 or 2 hours control our mind in this way, it is clear to me that Arjuna would not have reacted this way, right? Then text 35, which I really like, is Krishna's response to Arjuna's response. Krishna says, "O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment." I really like this verse. The reason why is because Krishna is now motivating us, right? It's like, yes, it is difficult, but it is possible. So he's not just giving us a task that is difficult and say, yeah, just do it, being calloused. He's like, no, it is difficult, but it's possible, you can do it. So he's giving us some motivation. But what I like the most is the fact that he says suitable practice. It is possible by suitable practice, because that implies that you can practice in a suitable way, or that you can practice in a way which is not suitable, which would require our discrimination and our intelligence. This is where association of sincere spiritualists is very important, because now we can start to have discrimination between what is a suitable practice and what is not. Kim, you oftentimes mentioned that you came from a Christian background, and so did I. And that background, it's, you know, you go to church, you listen to the priest, and you read the Bible, and your lifestyle doesn't really change that much. There's some philosophical fallacies, but it's kind of like very superficial in terms of the impacts that makes in your lifestyle. And therefore, when I looked towards something else, I was really looking for something esoteric, right? The Kundalini energy, our chakras, and opening our third eye, and all that was very attractive and seductive to me. And I was looking for something like very esoteric that way. Are those things even practical? Are those things suitable? Like, we don't know. Like, what is the end goal? Like you mentioned, you do meditation for a long period of time, staring at the tip of your nose. What is the goal? If I try to open my third eye, have I conquered my mind? If I open my heart chakra, have I defeated lust? Am I no longer angry under any circumstance? Like, how am I going to actually be able to control my mind and conquer my mind? So there are so many different ways that nowadays is spread around like fake news, and like even the way it impacts our democracy even, right? Like the presidential elections and so on is so impacted by the so-called fake news, and everybody's out there with something to say. Even we are. Here's what we're doing. We're here. We're saying, hey, we have something to say about Krishna. But so is everybody else. And what people are saying are different things. And how do we know what is actually good, what's actually bona fide, what's actually going to take us there? It is only going to be something which is suitable, because there's so many things that are not suitable. So although not directly stated, but only implied, I really like that Krishna said that it is possible, but by suitable practice, because it puts the responsibility on our hands to be sober, so we can discern between something that is actually good or something that is just more of the same nonsense, where the end result is purely sense gratification, but from a more elevated way, but not something that is going to allow me to love Krishna. So we need to know what is suitable practice. Krishna is saying suitable practice here for a reason, to imply that there are practices that are not suitable. And it is up to us as humans to know what is suitable practice and engage in them. Even though difficult, it is possible if we are engaging in a suitable practice.
Yeah, I really like your points there about being suitable and versus non-suitable, because I would have missed that as well. The Krishna's point about calling out, oh, is it suitable or not? And in modern day spirituality, at least in our society, so much focus, like you said, is on the chakras and your energy and your aura. And based on my experience, having spent many years in the energy healing world, the point is always kind of comes back to materialism, where, oh, I'm going to align my chakras, I'm going to work on this chakra, that chakra for abundance. Everything's about abundance. I'm going to manifest this. I'm going to manifest that. And what are you manifesting? I'm manifesting love, money, job, career, relationship, a new house. It's all about materialism. And Tukram makes this point a lot in class, is when you are approaching a tradition or even discussing topics of spirituality, is the focus on materialism and what you can get in this world, or is the focus on the afterlife, so to speak, and the focus on getting closer to divinity, having that relationship with Krishna? And I think it's a really good point when you look at any group or spiritual tradition, is what is their focus? So yeah, I like that a lot, the suitableness.
And then if the focus is to enjoy to a greater extent, I'm going to open up this chakra or that chakra so I can make more money and I can buy a new house. Your mind is still not controlled, because the end result is just lusty and greedy. Then your mind is not controlled. So that's not a suitable practice, right? If we actually want to conquer this really difficult task, it must be done by a suitable practice, you know?
Yeah.
So now text 36 through 44 is quite interesting. And I think we can talk about them like all together instead of reading all the texts. I think we can summarize it and get to the essence of them, because I think there's a really interesting point there. So essentially what happens from 36 through 44 is that Arjuna, having heard Krishna's response to his objection that this practice is not practical, then Arjuna responds after Krishna motivates him by saying, oh yeah, it's possible if it's suitable and so on. Then Arjuna expresses two doubts. He says, but Krishna, what if I try this, let's say for a number of years, but then I give up? Or what if I try this and never give up? And to the end of my life, I continue to try this practice, but it wasn't enough, right? Let's say I meet with death, but it wasn't enough to truly still conquer my mind and purify my mind and conquer it to attain the ultimate destination. Like what happens, right? And this is a really good question because it's a sincere question. We should have healthy doubts, a healthy skepticism of things. That's a sign of intelligence because, hey, I'm about to dedicate my life to this. So I want to know what happens to me. Like I want to, like when you buy a house, for example, all kinds of things happens. You have to bring in an inspector. They have to look, how is the house now? How is it going to hold up in so many years from now? So we ask all these questions because it's a serious thing. You're about to invest a lot of your time and money into that thing. So similarly, if we take spiritual life serious, you would naturally be wondering, what will happen to me if I really try this path for about 10 years or so, but then I give up? Then what? Like what happens? Or furthermore, I tried to the end of my life, but I get to the end of my life and that wasn't sufficient for me to completely transcend or attain the perfectional goal. What happens to me? So those are really interesting questions. And Krishna responds by saying that if you try for a number of years, but then you give up, so let's say from the mid of your life to the end of your life, you gave up, you're no longer practicing, right? Still, there was that period of 1 through 10 or 15 years, let's say, where you sincerely tried. And those activities were good. So you're going to have karmic good reactions. And Krishna explains that at death, what happens is you're going to go to higher planetary systems and enjoy there because you did spend a number of years engaging yourself sincerely in something that was good. So for every action, there's a reaction. So if you engage in activities that are good, you're going to have good results. The good results of that is that you go to higher planetary systems where enjoyment is even higher and you're going to enjoy there. But then when your pious credits run over, you come back down to an earthly-like planet. And then you take birth in the house of some family that are, let's say, well off, where struggling for your basic necessities of life is not going to be your primary occupation. You have some financial facilities, and you're going to be in the home of some, let's say, religious or spiritually inclined-minded people. So then you kind of pick up in that, let's say, mid-stage where you left off. But then what's quite interesting is that Krishna's answer to those who try to the end of their lives. It's interesting because Krishna responds differently. He says that for those people, we come right back to the life of sages, like really deep spiritual people, people that are not taking spiritual life lightly, but they're taking spiritual life very seriously, very deeply. They have theoretical and realized knowledge of spiritual life. And you take birth right back in the house of such, in the family, in such a family. And let me find the actual text here. by virtue, this is text 44, by virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. So what I like here is this almost predeterministic way. Now, I shouldn't say almost. What I actually like here is this deterministic way in which your fate is going to be treated. And it's almost a difficult thing to stand by, because it almost takes away your free will, because, well, I'm going to automatically become attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. So even if I'm not seeking it, automatically that's going to happen. It's predetermined. Like it almost takes your free will out, which can create a lot of philosophical problems, right? But what is being described here to me is Krishna's loving nature and power, right? Because he has the power to do this, take us from one life into another one, allowing us to pick up exactly where we left off, but in a very loving way. Which person would not want that? If you have engaged your life sincerely into attaining something, but unfortunately you couldn't, in your next life, which person would want to start from scratch or start in a position where things are more difficult than they were before, or you are as prone to making the same errors that you did before? You wouldn't want that, because that means that all the sacrifices and efforts that you put in your previous life are now more or less neutralized, and you're going to start from scratch. Who knows whether you're going to go left or right, whether you're going to have people to instruct you in the right path or not, whether or not you're going to have suitable practice available for you, right? So you would certainly want that to be the case, that you're going to automatically become attracted to the principles that you were attracted to when you left off, and that would happen even without you seeking them. So I really like this verse, because in this deterministic way, Krishna shows his loving nature, because he allows us to continue right where we left off. What are your thoughts on that, Kim?
Yeah, this is a point of our philosophy that really intrigued me when I first learned about it. This idea that after this lifetime, you just kind of pick up where you left off again. Because one of my fears has been in the past that, is it going to take me another 40 years in the next lifetime to get my act together? Or am I going to spend those years like doing ridiculous, ignorant things? And I pray frequently that that will not be the case. And so what it comes down to, I think, is, as with many things in life, is, do we really believe in an all good God? Because wouldn't all good God make it so that let's take the scenario of you tried and tried and just didn't quite make the finish line. You never fell away, but maybe you just didn't quite make it there. In the next life, an all good God would set you up so that maybe you're born into a family who's inclined towards this tradition, or you're born into this idea where you're automatically attracted to yogic principles, attracted to studying Vedic texts. And I fully believe that in some way, if I fall short in this lifetime, that Krishna will definitely set me up in the next lifetime to continue where I left off. So it's a really important point for our philosophy, especially compared to other religions like Christianity, like you mentioned. That's where my experience comes from in my earlier life, of this idea of one life, one and done. You better make it happen in this life, otherwise it's heaven or hell. And so this question of Arjuna's, of essentially, what happens, am I going to make it to heaven? What happens if I don't make it to heaven? It's a really valid question that I think every person and everyone who's ever been involved in any religion would always ask. And I remember asking my parents when I was younger, what happens if you don't make it to heaven, and what's going to happen to me? And just this black and white answer of heaven or hell. Well, that's not very encouraging. And so you end up living this life of fear. But this philosophy of, okay, Krishna can set you up in different ways. And these are these texts are very specific about how the different scenarios might play out in your next incarnation. And I really love that.
So a great point. Something that I like that a lot of our teachers would do is that, because obviously we want to subscribe to something that is the best. Otherwise, why would we be following this, right? So having had a chance to study multiple different religious traditions and spiritual paths, I ultimately chose this one. Well, it is obvious that I chose this one because I thought this one was the best. Otherwise, I would have chosen something else, right? So it is inevitable that we're going to think this path is the best, not necessarily the only, but the best. Now, one of the reasons why I think ours is the best is because I really like our way to philosophically analyze what our text is saying and contrast that to our experience in the world. If it is congruent, it is more likely that that is true. If it is not congruent, we have just placed ourselves in a more difficult position to make a case for this thing that doesn't seem to be congruent to actually be real. And here's what I mean by that. What you just said, right? If we live and die, and then we pick up, or of course, reincarnation here is automatically implied, right? We're not making I'm not making an argument for whether or not reincarnation is true. I'm accepting that and moving forward. What would it be like? So let's analyze it from this philosophical way, which I really like our tradition for doing. Let's break our lives into 1 year segments. So let's say I spent the year of 2020, let's say, this year. This year, I spent entirely very focused, learning technology, because COVID-19 is now a hit and we need to be more familiar with technology in order to interact with people via the internet, virtual meetings, etc. And I was a person who didn't know anything about technology prior to 2020. Let's say if that was the case. Then starting on January 1st of 2020, I start applying myself. I start reading books about the internet and computers and virtual meetings, and I start learning this. And to the end of the year, I continue, like I'm struggling somehow because technology wasn't really my nature. It wasn't easy for me to understand, but all the way to December 31st, I was sincerely trying to learn. All right, but now we are breaking our lives in blocks of 1 year, right? So then let's say I die December 31st, and then I'm born again, and this is 2021. Would it be fair that again, I'm completely ignorant to technology? Or would it be more congruent that I pick up where I left? It's 2021 now, and I am again, let's say, 40 years old, right? And I'm going to be completely ignorant to technology again? That wouldn't make sense. That wouldn't be the case. I would simply wake up in a new year, and I would have access to everything that I just learned in the previous year. And I would continue exactly where I left off. That's logical. If it wasn't like that, I mean, people will even make movies out of these things, right? There's a movie where, I forgot the name of the movie. There's a famous character that plays in the movie, but I think what happens is he's in love with a woman who every night she goes to sleep and she forgets, she loses all her memory.
Oh, 50 First Dates. Yeah.
What is it called?
50 First Dates or something like that. 30 First Dates.
Something like that, yeah. And then every day in the morning, he has to have her fall in love with him all over again, because every time she sleeps, she forgets everything, right? So we even make a movie out of this to highlight how inappropriate that would be, how illogical that would be. So it is only logical that if reincarnation is something we accept, that you would pick up exactly where you left off, because otherwise you have to make a case for why is it that you wouldn't be this way. And that's harder to make a case for why you wouldn't be that way than to make a case for why you would be that way, because it is like that now. You go to sleep December 31st, you wake up January 1st, it's a new year, but you pick up where you left off. It's logical.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that.
And then, do you have any other points about this chapter in general, Kim, that you like?
No, I think we covered everything pretty thoroughly, actually. So
Because
I don't have anything to add.
right at the very end, the very
Hmm.
last texts, as traditionally Krishna will do in Gita, we go right back to him in a very strong way, which is to say, we can make an argument that every chapter actually is about bhakti, and it is about loving Krishna. So the last two texts reads, text 46, a yogi is greater than an ascetic, greater than the empiricist, greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. And then 47, which is the last one, and of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. How about God having an opinion? How humble he is, right? That's just my opinion. He even leaves room for us to disagree. But he says, but that's my opinion. So I think it just highlights Krishna's wise, humble, caring nature, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I liked Tukram's point in class also on Friday about, in the end, no matter what path you take, eventually everyone becomes a bhakta, or everyone must become a bhakta,
Right.
devoted to Krishna. So it all comes back to the same place.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we went a little bit extra this time, but I think it was appropriate to give this chapter what it deserved. There were so many good points in this chapter that I loved.
That's true. And we also covered two classes in one episode. So naturally,
Yeah,
maybe we take a little longer.
2 for 1. All
That's
right.
right.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the listener for tuning in. And I really encourage you to look up Tukram Prabhu's Gita class this last Friday. It's posted online, Facebook, Instagram, and he's such a good teacher, and you'll get so much more out of this chapter if you tune into that as well. So, all right. Thank you, Tadeo, and we'll see you again next week. Haribol.
Thank you. Haribol.